Welcome back to the tournament. In this competition, we decide the best rapper from a list of 2,048 different MCs. Check out part 1 for the rules regarding this tournament and for brackets 1 through 8. Today in part 2, we cover brackets 9 through 16. Let's get into it. So for round 1 of bracket 9, I went with Consequence over Mal's Monday. Mal's is one of my favorite rappers out right now, but I have to give it to Consequence due to his superior discography and all the work he's done with Kanye over the years. His debut, Don't Quit Your Gay Job, is seriously underrated and worth checking out. Q-Tip definitely better than Cardi or God. Young Tony, or OVO Hush as he's now known as, 100% better than Azalea Banks.
And I know they set my bitch up. I know they set my bitch up. I know they fucking did.
Jesus Christ. Veggie, Bluebills, and Malik Yusuf are both great to me. This one can change by the day, but for now I will with Malik Yusuf. I think he has the superior pen game and more diversity. Lord Sco isn't as much of an icon as compared to Tila Rock, but Tila Rock's rapping style is very outdated in my opinion. Lord Sco is a lot sharper when it comes to technical rapping and makes better music in my opinion. I went with Lil Keed over the stalker scammer herself, Miss Ruby Rose. I'm not a fan of either, but Keed at least stuck out more as an artist and has a couple solid tracks. Mr. Funky versus Juju is debatable and very close in my opinion. I went with Juju for superior punchlines, higher discography peak, and more versatility as a producer. Oheen Savant over Fetty Wap. I've never been the biggest Field Mob fan, their music just sounds so dated to me, so I went with Benedict. Odyssey is definitely better than Big Baby Gucci in pretty much all aspects. Always been a big fan of him and his music. Alwasta, Tangible Dream, and especially The Iceberg are all amazing albums to me. He's also a great producer. His soulful production style is incredible to me. He also has all of his work with Diamond District like March on Washington for example. Amazing content, messaging, and storytelling too. So overall, yeah, I had to go with Odyssey. Greg Nice better than Michael Franti. Shabam Sadiq over K-Flock. Lord Tariq over Amil. Rab versus Sideshow is debatable. I know Rab has been blowing up like crazy with a lot of people loving his music, but his voice can sometimes be a turnoff for me. Not always, but it does sometimes turn me off. I also find his beats to be kind of generic. Sideshow is a lot more distinct and makes better music in my opinion. He's also scrapped with tougher lyricists like Bully James and Mike. DJ Hollywood over MC Klepto, and lastly, of course, we have to give it to Bun B over Slim Jimmy. Second round, here we go. Consequence versus Q-Tip. Ironic that they got paired up together as their cousins and have collaborated several times together, but of course we gotta go Q-Tip on this one. Malik Yusuf over Young Tony, although it's debatable. Malik's body of work is stronger than Tony's in my opinion. Hush's voice can sometimes be a turnoff for me as well. I also have to give Malik credit for all the work he's put in with Kanye over the years. Lord Sco, of course, better than Lil Keed. Juju over Oheen due to diversity and hits. Odyssey over Benedict. I had Shabam Sadiq over Greg Nice, which may throw some people off, but I've never been the biggest fan of nice and smooth music personally. Sideshow is probably the better lyricist compared to Lord Tariq, but I prefer Tariq's music. And for the final matchup, I went with Bun B over DJ Hollywood. So for the third round, I went with Q-Tip over Malik Yusuf pretty easily, Juju over Lord Sco, Odyssey over Shabam, and Bun B over Lord Tariq. Semifinals, I went with Q-Tip over Juju. In all aspects, whether you're talking about rapping or production, Q-Tip clears in my opinion. And while it hurts to kick out Odyssey, as he's always been one of my favorite artists, I had to give it to Bun B. Finally, Q-Tip over Bun B, meaning Q-Tip is in our top 64. So for the first round of bracket 10, I chose RX Nephew over Drakeo, although I'm not a fan of either. Jim Legacy, one of the best rappers out right now, 100% better than the Tupac knockoff Black Haze. Not a big fan of Mercury's or Rob Bass, but you can make arguments for either. Rob Bass has one of the greatest rap songs of all time with It Takes Two, but he was a one-hit wonder during a time where rapping skills were not that advanced. Mercury's, while not my cup of tea, is a lot sharper, so I went with him. Henry Osborne, without debate, is better than Ian, aka Mr.
Suck Me Through the Cell.
ASAP Ferg, in terms of production, hits, energy, and delivery, better than Big Clam. Bungie of Villain Park over Little Durk, although to be fair, you can make arguments for either. Bungie's a better lyricist with a better flow and more energy on the mic, but he doesn't have any of the hits that Durk does, and he doesn't stand out as much. Regardless, I still prefer Villain Park's music to Durk, so I went with Bungie. Not a big fan of Duke Deuce or Young Blue, but Deuce does have some cool songs. Buddy, just because he's more of a rapper compared to Black, I picked him. Lario over the meme rapper TJX6. Sauce Money over Camouflage. Weird Tommy Quan and Lil Xan are both whack to me, respectfully, but I went with Quan as he's comparatively more tolerable and has a couple cool songs. Chuck D being the legend that he is, obviously better than Gmoski, Currency over Trippie Redd, Scoop over Night Lavelle, Canadian rapper Mayhem Moriarty took out the second Dubak clone, The Realist, and lastly K.R.I.T over K.R.I.T, but I've got to say I'm not crazy for either. I think K.R.I.T has a nice voice, so that alone puts him above K.R.I.T for me. Round 2, I chose Jim over RX Nephew, then Henri Osborne over Mercules in pretty much all aspects. He's very underrated. His imagery is incredible, it's like watching a movie whenever I listen to him. Love his music, not just his solo material, but his work with Dark Time Sunshine too. He's rapped alongside heavyweights like Aesop Rock, Chesky, Bus Driver, and more. Check out ANX or Nervous Hand if you haven't. Bungie might be a better lyricist than A$AP Ferg, but Ferg wins in every other category in my opinion. Buddy over Duke Deuce, Sauce Money over Larry O, although this one was very close. I went with Sauce Money because I feel his work with other artists as a writer makes him a more versatile artist. Chuck D 1000% better than Rich Homie Quan, glad he's out, respectfully. Scoop over Currency, and Mayhem Moriarty over K.R.I.T. For round 3, I went with Henri Osborne over Jim Legacy because while Jim is really dope, he's just starting out. He doesn't have the same developed and fleshed out career that Henri has, plus Henri is the superior lyricist in my opinion. Ferg over Buddy, although I'm kinda surprised Ferg has made it this far honestly. Chuck D over Sauce Money, and lastly Scoop took out Mayhem Moriarty. Semifinals, I had to go with Henri Osborne over A$AP Ferg in pretty much every aspect of rapping. Bar for bar, Henri would destroy Ferg at a battle or have the better verse in a collaboration. Plus he makes the better music in my opinion. Ferg's catalog grew off me heavily. And not that it needs much explanation, but Chuck D over Scoop. And Chuck D also won their finals, meaning he's on our top 64. Okay, so first round, back at 11. I went with Drake over Bizarre, pretty easily. I mean, does this need much of an explanation? Mr. Cheeks over Swifty. Lupe Fiasco, of course better than Spider Loc. I'm not a fan of Superboy or Baby Santana, but I went with Superboy because he does have a couple of cool songs. Spoonie G versus Earl Blaze is debatable, depending on what you value more. You guys know me, I don't care a lot about influence or status, so I went with Earl Blaze. His rapping skills are far superior. Antipop Consortium's second album is really dope, definitely check it out. Spätzle 1 versus Neek the Exotic is also debatable, but I think Neek's music has aged better, so I went with him. Next, we have a battle for the ages, as two of the worst rappers go head to head, and I unfortunately can't believe I'm uttering these words. But I went with Iggy Azalea, but this is as far as she's going to make it in the tournament. Noriega, obviously better than Nardo Wick. Don't care about Escadal or Low Q, but Escadal is more tolerable, so I went with him. R.A. the Rugged Man over Tin Dog, R.A. has the superior storytelling and more standout verses. J Flex versus Gunplay is a tough matchup. You can argue J Flex had a bigger impact on hip-hop as he was one of Dr. Dre's ghostwriters and had a pretty good diss track aimed at Dre as well. Gunplay was never super skilled, but he was able to out-rap Prime Kendrick on Cartoons and Serial. But based on accomplishments in the genre, I went with J Flex. Unknown T over DMG is I don't think DMG's music has aged that well personally. Young Morpheus over RMR. Jeru the Damaja over Frank Sativa, pretty easily. CL Smooth over Rush, again, pretty easily. And lastly, 2 Chainz over Sleepy Hollow, but I'm not crazy for either. For the second round, I went with Drake over Mr. Cheeks, but you can make an argument for either. I like both, but Drake makes the marginally better music and would probably win in a versus. On top of that, Drake has several great diss tracks, and I don't think Mr. Cheeks could ever make a diss track as good as Duppy Freestyle, Push-Ups, Family Matters, or Good Riddance. Drake has accomplished more, has more versatility, and has the better beat selection as well, in my opinion. Moving from there, we have Lupe versus Superboy, and of course we gotta go with Lupe. Ironic, 2 Chicago-based rappers went against each other in this matchup. Neek the Exotic versus Earl Blaze is a tough matchup that can change by the day. I went with Neek though, because I slightly prefer his music at the time I'm writing this at least. Nori over Iggy Azalea, thank the Lord she is out. R.A. of course above Escadal, J Flex over Unknown T, Jeru over Young Morpheus, and obviously CL Smooth is better than 2 Chainz in basically every aspect. Round 3, Lupe took out Drake, pretty self-evident. Same with Nori and Neek, R.A. and J Flex. But the last matchup might be the hardest one so far. I love both Jeru and CL Smooth, both incredible lyricists with great discographies. You can make an argument for either, and my mind can change by the day, but at the moment, I give it to Jeru. I think he's the slightly superior lyricist, I prefer his music marginally, and I also think he has the better flow, wordplay, and metaphors. For the semifinals, I went with Lupe Fiasco over Nori, as I believe he's superior in terms of lyricism, songwriting, creativity, storytelling, diversity, discography, content, and he would probably win in a rap battle. Another tough matchup between R.A. the Rugged Man and Jeru the Damaja, but I went with Jeru as I believe he has the better production, discography, and is more of a consistent lyricist. Occasionally, R.A. can slip into spiritual lyrical miracle territory and can come across as a bit pretentious and corny. Not always, but it has happened before. I don't think I've ever had that issue with Jeru. Lupe versus Jeru in the finals is very close for me as well. I love both, but I went with Lupe based on his accomplishments in hip-hop, diversity, storytelling, content, messaging, conceptual creativity, and his larger and more consistent discography with higher peaks. Starting out in round 1, I went with the legendary Rev Run over Ant Banks. That was pretty easy for me. Then I went with Money B over Knowledge the Pirate, Money Love over Cash Dummy. Sad to see a sadistic get knocked out so early, as he's very underrated in my opinion. He stands out because of his detailed lyrics, dark and cinematic vibes, and a real emotional openness. Instead of chasing mainstream formulas, he pushed underground and alternative rap in a more artistic direction, basically carving out his own lane with that quote-unquote shoegaze rap feel, poetic writing over haunting atmospheric production. It wasn't about conveyor belt rap, it was about depth, mood, and layers, which is why he built such a dedicated audience and influenced people who wanted something more complex and different. You could argue he was doing quote-unquote emo rap before the genre really popped off in the late 2010s, and he's a competent lyricist with dope songs, rapping alongside Sticky Fingers, Tech 9, Vastier, Idea, and The Cunnilinguist. Eden and To Be Loved are terrific songs you should definitely check out if you haven't. But of course, with all of that said, Jay-Z is definitely superior. More Mother over Mark 7, as I feel like she sticks out more as an artist. Big K.R.I.T obviously better than Lil Zane in every aspect. Don't care about Mano or Killy, but I went with Mano. The Claim has a much larger body of work compared to Redville, but a lot of his stuff feels aimless and generic. Redville has a style and sound that's all his own with a better discography in my opinion. Rasco from Cali Agents over Young Goth, Invincible over YGD the Top Dog, Westside Gunn over Sony Chiba. Next I went with Joey Cool over Huss King 10 because I feel like Joey is more distinct of an artist and has the better flow, but I prefer Huss's music a bit more, although not by that much. I can't believe I'm going to be defending Fred Durst of all people, but at least he had an original sound and style all to his own, and that's a couple of cool tracks with Limp Bizkit. Mr. Slurge's music does nothing for me. Ill Will versus Anderson .Paak is debatable. Ill Will would probably slaughter Anderson in any formal rapping competition, but Anderson wins in pretty much everything else. Discography, diversity, content, voice, delivery, and lyrically he's no slouch. No Name obviously better than No T Genesis, and Fonteo from Mickey Blanco needs no explanation. For the second round, I went with Run over Money B, Jay-Z over Money Love, Big K.R.I.T over More Mother as I prefer his music style, delivery, voice, production, content, and flow, Redville over Mano. Mano is very generic to me, and Redville is one of the most promising new talents out right now. His 2022 album is probably my favorite record from him. Rascal vs Invincible is debatable. I'm not crazy for Invincible's music. Not saying it's bad, I'm just kind of indifferent to it. I prefer Cali Agent's discography, but Rascal in my opinion was always in the shadow of Planet Asia with Cali Agent's music, but I still went with him as I prefer his catalog. Westside Gunn over Joey Cool, maybe not lyrically or in terms of flow, but in terms of diversity, artistic output, and curation skills. Anderson .Paak, obviously better than Fred Durst, glad he's out, and Fonte over No Name. Third round, I went with Jay-Z over Rev Run, handily, Big K.R.I.T over Redville, because K.R.I.T has the much larger and more impressive body of work. Next I chose Westside Gunn over Rasco, and finally, it sucks to see Anderson .Paak get knocked out as I've always loved him and his art, but Fonte is easily the better MC and artist, basically in every aspect. For the semifinals, I went with Jay-Z over Big K.R.I.T, then Fonte over Westside Gunn. From there, in the final round, Jay-Z took off Fonte, meaning Jay-Z is now in our top 64, and Fonte our top 128. For the first matchup of the first round of bracket 13, I went with Brother Ali over Shingo 2, J Royale over Lil Loaded, Buffalo Steel over John Cena! Lojai over ASAP 12E. I went with Heems over J-Rock. I prefer Heems' sense of humor, style, and I feel like he has the better discography. He's a part of the trio Das Racist and has made some great, and in my opinion, legitimately funny tracks that have aged really well. He's also racked with tough lyricists like Danny Brown, LP, Earl Drew, Kool AD, Rock Marciano, and more. Das Racist Sit Down Man mixtape from 2010 was great, one of the best mixtapes I've ever heard. J-Rock is dope too, but I feel like he kinda fell off after 2018. Some also may deduct points from the guy for using writers like Kendrick too. Yeah, the Arsonist is pretty dope, but I went with Synonymously as I prefer his music. I went with Bizzy Bone over Pop the Brown Hornet. He might be the better lyricist, but in terms of the catalog, style, and diversity, I had to give it to Bizzy. Then I went with YG Tut over Nocturnal. I think Tut's music has aged a lot better in my opinion. He was also a great storyteller and has good messaging. Wyclef Jean, of course, better than Don Kennedy. Takeoff over Polari. The God Fahim over Lil Yachty. Michael Myers has a much more fleshed out career compared to Scarlet Rose, who just has a couple of features. She might be the better lyricist though, so you can make arguments for either, but I went with Michael Myers. Young Berg and Dash are both whack rappers in my opinion, but Ferg has a couple of tolerable songs, so I chose him. Lauryn Hill, obviously over Casey Veggies. Don't care about Tony Yayo or Baby Goth, but Tony at least made some classics for G-Unit. And Charlie Baltimore over the meme rapper Low Index. Round 2. I went with Brother Ali over J Royale in terms of catalog, delivery, versatility, and messaging. Buffalo still doesn't have much outside of his work with Nappy Roots, so I went with Lojai on this one. Sedim Stilla versus Heems is a tough matchup for me, but I went with Heems as he has the larger body of work. That said, Binary Star's Masters of the Universe is better than anything Heems has ever put out in my opinion. Bizzy Bone over YG Tut, Wyclef over Takeoff, The God Fahim over Michael Myers, Lauryn Hill over Young Berg, absolutely, and finally I went with Charlie Baltimore over Tony Yayo. For the third round, I chose Brother Ali over Lojai. Ali is very talented and has the stronger discography in my opinion. Shadows on the Sun, Morning in America, Secrets and Escapes, All the Beauty in This Whole Life, and Satisfied Soul are all classics to me. Bizzy Bone over Heems, Wyclef over Fahim, and Lauryn Hill over Charlie Baltimore in terms of versatility, catalog, and lyrics. In semi-finals, I went with Brother Ali over Bizzy Bone. Ali has the better messaging, depth, and I prefer his voice and delivery. East 1999 Eternal is better than any Brother Ali album though, so you can make an argument for either. Wyclef Jean versus Lauryn Hill. Ironic that they got matched up together, but I think Lauryn was always in a league of her own, comparatively speaking. And lastly, for the finals, I went with Lauryn, meaning she's in our top 64. First off, in round 1, I went with DNA over Milkbone. Milkbone does have some cool songs, but I don't think you can mess with DNA. He had a pretty weak diss track aimed at Eminem, for example. Chris Calico, obviously better than YF and Lucci. I went with Farnsworth Bentley with all the work he's done with Kanye over the years over Speech to Bell, but this matchup is debatable. Lady Luck doesn't have the discography of Mo Pope, so I went with him. Trife over Sage, Ninth Print over The Diddler Son, Sue Surf over Starlito. Neither Slang Ton or Stan Spit have a large body of work, but Slang has impressed me with more of his verses, so I chose him. Missy over Timo, Snoop over KSI, easily. Mark Battles versus BG Knockout is debatable, but I went with BG Knockout as I prefer his music and loved his Dog Pound Killer diss track. Capone better than Jackboy. Don't care about Zoe or Stunner Girl, both are trash in my opinion, but Zoe's music got a reaction out of me, so I gave it to him. Rashad over Skirmish. Silk Money is one of the more interesting rap artists out right now, but I gave it to Superstar Komala due to his superior lyricism and discography. And Michi Darko over Curtis Blow. I don't care about how legendary Curtis is, his rapping style and music are incredibly dated. I've always loved the Flatbush Zombies music. Second round, I went with DNA over Chris Calico, mostly because I've never really cared for Chris's music personally. It's not bad, just not for me. Surprisingly, I actually went with Mr. Bentley again over Mo Pope. Everybody featuring Andre 3000 and Kanye West is one of the best rap songs of all time. His 2011 album Colors is also very underrated, but you can make the argument for Mo Pope, and I wouldn't begrudge any of you if you chose him. Trife versus Ninth Prince is also a tough matchup for me. This one can change by the day, to be honest. I went with Ninth Prince at the moment as I feel like Kill Army's debut is clear of anything Trife has made. Sue Surf has a much larger body of work and more accomplishments than Slang Ton, so I went with him. Such a shame that Missy gets eliminated so early on in the tournament, but I had to go with Snoop. BG Knockout over Capone, Rashad over Zoe, thankfully he's out, and Michi over Komala. For the third round, I have a tough time choosing between DNA and Farnsworth, but I had to be fair and pick DNA in this matchup. I love what Mr. Bentley has done for music, but I can't see him making it further in the tournament. Sue Surf and Ninth Prince is another debatable matchup. My gut is currently saying to go Ninth Prince on this matchup, but it is indeed close and can change by the day. And then Snoop Doggy Dogg over BG Knockout, and Rashad, while I love the guy's music and think his Element of Surprise album is incredibly underrated, Michi has a more distinct style and a better and larger discography. I also prefer his voice, cadence, and delivery. Semifinals, Ninth Prince over DNA strictly when it comes to discography, and Snoop Dogg is better than Michi Darko in my opinion. Still love FBZ though. And for the final round, Snoop Dogg over Ninth Prince, not lyrically, but in every other category. So Snoop made it to our top 64. Starting off in the first round at bracket 15, I went with Crazy Dre's over YC, then Jeezy over DMD Madrox, Fady Black over Saucy Santana.
And after I beat you, I'ma fuck you on your ass, fuck you on your ass, fuck you on your ass.
Oh, hell no!
Dizzy Wright over Lil Easy. I actually went with Dizzy Rascal over Beretta 9. Lyrically, I think Beretta is superior, but in terms of style, discography, and content, I favor Dizzy. Kung Fu Vampire, easily better than Diggy Simmons. Exile, mostly known for his incredible production, also did some rapping, and that's more than enough to beat Scarlord. In terms of freestyling and battling, I think Eric Jamal would destroy Amine, but in every other category, I think Amine is superior. Style, discography, diversity, content, expressing emotions too. You can make an argument for either, but I went with Amine. Tory Lanez in terms of storytelling, flow, and diversity is better than ESG in my opinion. Sean Price, easily better than Star Fox Flair. Next I chose Damaja over Artemis. Not a fan of Yelawolf or Lil Dicky, but Yelawolf has some verses and songs that have impressed me. I doubt Lil Dicky could write a verse as good as Yellow's verse on One Train, or make a song as good as Punk with Juicy J and Travis Barker. One below, Binary Stars leaks better than Baby Chief Do It. I'm not a big fan of Connor Price's music personally, it just cringes me out more than my old videos, but I would still argue he's more skilled than Be Legit. Kumo D better than Dougie Fresh, and finally Elemano over Tootsie Fruit. In the second round I started off with Dre's over Jeezy, then Baby Black over Dizzy Wright, Dizzy Rascal over Kung Fu Vampire, Exile over Amine due to his production capabilities, Sean Price over Tory Lanez, All Day, Any Day, Damaja over Yelawolf, One Below over Connor Price, and Kumo D over Elemano. For the third round I went with Dre's over Baby Black, Exile over Dizzy Rascal, Ruck over Damaja, and the last one is very tough for me. Kumo D is much more of an important figure, but his rapping style is very outdated in my opinion, and I don't really care about influence as you guys know. One Below's music is much better in my opinion, and I prefer his style. Binary Star was continuing the tradition of keeping things focused on hardcore beats and sharp rhymes in the indie hip-hop scene. Both Synonymously and One Below are what you could call a rapper's rapper, but my gut is still saying to go with Kumo D. Semifinals. I started out with Exile over Dre's. Strictly rapping wise, Dre's is better, but factoring in production and discography, I believe Exile is superior as the overall artist. Sean Price versus Kool Moe Dee is also a very close matchup and can change on a whim. Kool Moe Dee's music isn't my cup of tea personally, as it's way too dated for my liking, with the exception of his LL Cool J diss tracks, which to me have aged incredibly well, but that's just a spare couple of tracks. Always liked Sean Price's music a lot more. His work with Helta Skelta and Boot Camp Live, and even all his solo work. I also feel he's a superior lyricist with a better voice and delivery, so I went with Sean Price for the time being. And in the finals we had another tough matchup, but I ended up going with Sean Price. Sean's advantage as an MC is too large, and his overall presence as an artist is too strong for Exile to make up for it with his superb production skills, despite this being an artist tournament. Bracket 16, round 1, match 1. I went with Lil Uzi over No Plug. Then I went with AK the Savior over MCA. Always liked the underachievers more than the Beastie Boys, but you can make an argument for either. POS over Akinelli. Mac Lethal versus Peace is an interesting matchup, knowing they are both part of the battle rap circuit and battle some of the same MCs. Both talented at rapping, but Peace has never come across as corny or cringe, and has classics with Freestyle Fellowship. MC Trouble or Bankroll Fresh. Elucid versus Medhane is another unfortunate matchup, as Medhane got kicked out so early, but Elucid is definitely superior in my opinion. Open Mic Ego over Super Lever C. Mike helped pioneer art rap with his creative song concepts and witty sense of humor. Dark Comedy, Hella Personal Film Festival, Brick by the Kids Still Daydream are all classics to me. A tape called Component System, Neighborhood Guys Unlimited, a special episode of, and What Happens When I Try to Relax were all great too. Incredible storytelling, imagery, expression of emotions, creative song concepts. What's not to love? Black Rob over Low Key. I can't believe I included Rice Gum to begin with, but I went with Roy Jones Jr. Neither are very good though. Tech over Ready Snow, Travis over Hellraiser, and every other aspect outside of lyricism. Spin of Ends over Y&J, although I'm not a fan of either. Riggs over Central C, Danny Brown over Wretch, Conway over Fatboy Sharif, and surprisingly, I have to defend Malcolm Moore and rank him above Young Dro. At least he had good messaging in his music. In second round, I picked AK the Savior over Lil Uzi Vert pretty easily. POS is dope, and he's probably my favorite member of Doomtree. I'm generally not the biggest fan of their music, but POS was always dope to me. They helped create a sound that mixed hip-hop with jazz, punk, and rock, which made their music stand out from everything else at the time. They also pushed a do-it-yourself, team-based approach where artists worked together and stayed independent instead of relying on big labels. Their lyrics were smart and complex, which pulled in listeners who don't normally even like hip-hop. More than anything, they showed that a group could succeed on its own, both creatively and business-wise, and become a model for independent hip-hop artists. But with all that said, I had to give it to Peace here. I always prefer Freestyle Fellowship to Doomtree. Elucid, in all aspects superior to MC Trouble. Open Mic Eagle in terms of content, messaging, storytelling, emotional depth, creativity, and discography is superior to Black Rob. Tekka Smith and Weston is obviously better than Roy Jones Jr. Stick to boxing, buddy. Travis Scott over Spin Benz, Danny Brown over Riggs, and lastly Conway the Machine thankfully took out Malcolm Moore. Round 3, I went with Peace over AK the Savior. Both talented rappers with nice catalogs, but lyrically I don't think AK could mess with Peace. Mike Eagle over Elucid in terms of creativity, discography, and expressing emotions. Tech versus Travis Scott is debatable. In terms of pure rapping skills, I think Tech is pretty clearly better. But Travis has more diversity, would win in a versus, has a more distinct sound and style with multiple great records. That said, Smith & Wesson's The Shining clears any Travis album. But yeah, I ultimately went with Travis, but my mind may change in the future. For the final matchup, we have another close call, but I ended up going with Danny Brown for his smaller but more consistent discography, content, diversity, and style. Both are among my favorite rappers of the 2010s though. Semifinals, we have a tough matchup. Peace would probably mollywop over Mike Eagle in a rap battle, but in every other category, I would give it to Mike. And Danny Brown is indeed superior to Travis Scott, basically in every aspect. For the final round, I chose Danny Brown over Open Mic Eagle. They've actually collaborated before, and Danny out-rapped Mike on his own song. I love both though and can make arguments for either, but as good as Mike's discography is, I don't think he's ever released an album better than Atrocity Exhibition. So Danny makes it to our top 64. That was all for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3 where we cover brackets 17 through 24. Let me know how you would rank these artists in the comments below. See you in the next video.